A whole world in one country. From snow-capped peaks to tropical rainforests, New Zealand is any traveller's dream. A jewel of the South Pacific. With something for everyone. Offering a guaranteed adrenaline rush, whatever your fancy may be. All set in spectacular scenery. New Zealand is the perfect backdrop for an ultimate journey. New Zealand is a relatively small country consisting of 2 islands. Wild, uninhabited coastlines stretch for miles, while subtropical rainforests cover spectacular fjords. It is these surroundings which make people want to come out and play. No wonder New Zealand is known as the extreme sports capital of the world. It caters for all levels. Whether you're a fanatic or simply wanting to take in the magnificent sights and sounds, you will be constantly amazed by the country's natural beauty. But for an adventure unlike any other, start your journey just east of North Island. With a bird's eye view of the Pacific, you're likely to have the company of several kinds of dolphins and whales. But then, White Island comes into view. So called because when Captain Cook discovered it in 1769, it was always enshrouded in a white mist. This small, uninhabited island hides a very big secret. It is an active volcano. Because it is so easily accessible, only 50 kilometers from the nearest town, it's a magnet for both scientists and tourists alike. On a scale of 1 to 5, the island is usually on a readiness level of 1 or 2. Landing on its Mars-like surface, it's clear that this is definitely not your run-of-the-mill guided tour. As expected, a few safety precautions need to be put in place before the exploring can begin.
Okay, we also have to carry a gas mask with us. We don't have to wear it, but if we get caught in the steam, we just have to breathe through it.
Okay, so just leave it in my
so just carry it with you.
Okay.
It's best explored with a guide, like Luke Holmes, who knows all the best spots, but also the safest way to get to them.
Most active areas on the island. This is about the most active area that we can get this close to. It's so unique. I mean, it's a very active volcano. There's lots of smells and steam and boiling water, lots of noises. It's a really neat place to visit. White Island's a strato-type volcano, means it doesn't have a hot lava flow, but it disperses red hot ash.
Although today it mainly bubbles and steams, the last big eruption happened in the year 2000, covering the island in a fine grey dust and creating a new crater. The rocks have a yellow colouring due to the high sulphur content, and the water runs at about 60 degrees Celsius. Scientists are constantly checking activity on the island, and they can measure up to 1,000 mini-earthquakes a day. This means the landscape of the volcano is constantly changing. From 1981 to 1983, several major eruptions transformed the landscape so that a burning hot lake was created. It shines in a variety of colors, from a brilliant grey to a dark green, depending on the sulfur content of the water. Walking round an active volcano may not be everyone's cup of tea, but there are other, less daring ways to enjoy New Zealand's thermal activity. Hell's Gate Thermal Reserve boils and bubbles with hot springs. The rising steam creates a mystical atmosphere. Patrick Tamati manages Hell's Gate Thermal Park, where you can enjoy the phenomenal landscape, but also the healing effects of the hot springs.
The water that we've got in the steam vents that you can see, the temperature in there ranges basically between 90 to 120 degrees Celsius. It's not that the water is hot, it's actually the minerals that are in the water are being superheated by the water itself, and it just, that is why we're getting so much heat in and out of those pools behind us.
New Zealand falls in the Ring of Fire region, an area of the Pacific Ocean particularly prone to volcanic and seismic activity. And nowhere is it more evident than in the Rotorua district. With its interesting sights, sounds and smells, tourists flock to see this unique and ever-changing landscape.
The only thing that changes with the pools is the colour of the water. It can either be a very dark brown to a greyish colour to a very lovely yellow sulphurous colour. So that seems to be the only thing. But because we're 1.5 kilometres away from the geothermal activity, quite often we have to change the routes or the tracks or the pathways through this geothermal park because we have so much activity here.
There are at least 500 pools and almost 65 geysers, 7 of which are still active. The most famous is the Pohutu geyser, which erupts every hour, sometimes spraying as high as 30 meters. For local Maori, this is the place where goddesses of fire emerged from the Earth's core, creating the geysers and mud pools with every breath they took. The Maori people came to New Zealand from Polynesia about 1,000 years ago. In Waitangi, the Maori legacy is preserved by the intricately carved meeting house, as well as the biggest war canoe still in existence. These are magnificent examples of Maori history and tradition. The Maori culture is vibrant and plays an important role for New Zealand tourism. In New Plymouth, the local Maori community perform a welcome ceremony for international artists performing in a forthcoming World Music Festival. It is tradition to greet every guest in front of the marae, or meeting house. By performing the hongi, a traditional Maori greeting, you are no longer considered a visitor, but a person of the land. For formal gatherings like today's, the Maori follow age-old protocols that involve welcome greetings by the chief and a tribute to the ancestors. Today, a group of visitors conclude the ceremony by performing the haka. This is a traditional war dance performed by fire warriors before battle. It involves much posturing and facial expression, like fierce grimacing and bulging eyes. But the haka takes many guises and can be performed by men and women. Luckily, nowadays, the haka is mainly performed to entertain. But it's not all about war dances and battle cries. The Maori are deeply spiritual, and everything is connected to this beautiful land. Mountains, like Mount Taranaki, play a vital role in Maori mythology. This mountain is actually an inactive volcano and is 2,500 meters high.
Tēnā koe rangatira, nā mihi nū ki a koe.
Expert guides like Tom Parsons will take you on a walk, explaining the local fauna and flora and its relevance to Maori culture. When New Zealand was colonized in the late 1700s, settlers brought animals such as dogs and cats with them. Until this point, none of the indigenous species had natural enemies, so the influx of these predatory animals played havoc with New Zealand's fragile ecosystem. The bird population, including the flightless kiwi, was especially hard hit, and their numbers plummeted. Today, special programs and facilities are in place to try and increase kiwi numbers. This one, called Kiwi Encounter, is in Rotorua. A dedicated team work day and night with these birds. Every morning, the birds are weighed and fed on a special kiwi diet. Emma Bean and Bridget Wren are in charge of this delicate task. But being only a few days old and a nocturnal bird, this one is long past its bedtime. Luckily, hunger wins this round.
This isn't natural food to them, so we have to teach them that this is food. So that's why we feed them once a day in the morning, and then after a week or so they should learn to do it by themselves, so then they'll come out at night and feed in their brooders.
The kiwi birds live in the lap of luxury. Their climate-controlled brooders have two partitions, one where they can sleep during the day, and another for roaming at night. Once they reach their target weight of 400 grams, they're moved to an outdoor enclosure with more space. All this is done in preparation for their release back into the wild. But Kiwi Encounters is more than just a nursery. They also take care of eggs until they're able to hatch in the safe and sterile environment of the incubators.
every year we've been hatching more and more chicks, and we raise over 100 chicks a year now, so we've learnt a lot in that time, the best techniques. We put the egg on the bench and we whistle to the egg, and we can see the egg rocking on the bench, so we know that the chick inside is alive. So that's a key management technique that we use.
Carefully, Emma lifts the egg and whistles. Luckily, it starts to move, a very good sign.
We candle the eggs twice a week, which is when we make the room dark and we put a torch on the egg so you can see all the veins and the membranes and the embryo inside the egg. So that's how we monitor the chick's growth inside the egg, and we can estimate how old the chick is.
A delicate job, but everything looks fine. And a few days later, the little chick makes its appearance. Hatching is an exhausting process for the chick and can take several days. Life outside carries on as usual. Emma and Bridget are preparing some of the chicks for release into the wild. Various measurements are taken, and they also need to get a feather for DNA testing.
We just make sure we get that juicy black bit, and that's where they get the DNA from. He's a bit wriggly today.
Vaccines and medicines need to be administered too. This is a little trickier.
There's a hole in his tongue. That hole goes down to their lungs, so we need to avoid that hole, because if we put liquid down there, they will die. So we just put the tube down the side of their throat.
Then Bridget has the difficult task of trying to locate a vein in the kiwi's leg. Fortunately, she's done this many times before.
That should be plenty. We need to make sure it doesn't have any blood parasites or before it gets released into the wild, because we don't want to introduce any new bugs or diseases into the wild.
For Aniwa, it's a big day. He has reached his goal weight of 1.2 kilograms, enough to stand a good chance of surviving in the wild.
We'll just double check his microchip number, which is correct, and we'll pop him in the weigh box to be released.
The team from Kiwi Encounters has done everything they possibly can to ensure the safest future for the little bird.
Hi there.
Sarah King from the Department of Conservation is on hand to collect the bird.
Cool. Okay, have a good release.
She will return him to Wirinaki Forest Park, where they first found the egg. Almost 12 million Kiwis used to wander around New Zealand's forests. Today, they number about 70,000. But conservation doesn't stop here. Sarah is accompanied by members of the local Maori community who are interested in the Kiwi release program. Only about 5% of Kiwi chicks survive the first 8 months of life. Ferrets, weasels, and domestic animals pose the biggest threat to this nocturnal creature.
Okay, here we go. Whoop. So hold him by the legs? Yep, it's all right, I'll show you how in a second. He's struggling well. Oh, he's really... There we go. So yeah, firmly around that part of the legs, so just swap under, nice and firm. Hand under the chest. There we go.
Oh, he likes you.
He's all settled down now, that's it. And then just pop him, yep, head first, make sure his head's well in the hole before you let go. Well in, yep, and then let go. Oh, look at him. A bit of shelter and a bit of dark.
The survival of New Zealand's national bird rests firmly in the hands of projects like this and the commitment of everyone involved. New Zealand is an amazing country. And with 15,000 kilometres of coast, no town is more than a 2-hour drive from the sea. It's a water baby's dream. Whether you're in it for the scenery or sporting action, New Zealand has it all. But somehow, it's the surfers who do best. With the variety of breaks, waves and reefs, New Zealand is a world-class surfing destination. Because beach life is so commonplace, New Zealand has a proud tradition of life-saving, and the annual surf life-saving competition attracts teams from all over the country. It's a fun day out for spectators as well as participants. A wide range of skill sets is tested: swimming, running, agility and paddling. But the bottom line is that you have to be super fit to compete with this lot. The surf boat race is the main event of the day. It's a tough competition and very prestigious. Surf boats aren't actually used for rescues anymore. Motorboats are far more effective, but maneuvering one of these giants through the water requires unbelievable strength, stamina and technique. The 400 metres to the buoy and back may sound a short distance, but it's not uncommon to suddenly see an unmanned boat bobbing in the water, and capsizing seems to be par for the course. Making it back to shore with crew intact doesn't mean you've won. Then there is a mad dash to the finish line, stretching tired men and women to their very limits. Not everyone has the honour of doing the final sprint. Some are lucky just to walk out with their oars in hand. The crowd loves it, and there is always someone around to soothe the bruised ego.
This gold medal of OA is the boat arena. PR.
But there are plenty of drier activities to sink your teeth into. South Island is especially well known for mountain biking, and the terrain provides a brilliant challenge, but also an unbelievable backdrop for the sport. Dominated by the Remarkables Range, lying on the banks of Lake Wakatipu, Queenstown has become the mecca of extreme sports. This is also the place where the first commercial bungee jumping spot was opened. This 43-metre jump is not the longest anymore by far, but it's still one of the most popular bungee spots in New Zealand. The Kiwis seem to be masters at inventing crazy sports, like jet boating. How about sphering or zorbing? Strictly speaking, it wasn't invented in New Zealand, but they certainly popularised it. Of course, there is only one way to achieve the ultimate adrenaline rush. Skydiving over Queenstown with a bird's eye view of the Remarkables mountain range is a dream jump for any skydiver. You can expect to free fall at 200 kilometers per hour for almost a minute, and then several minutes of gentle drifting until touchdown. For a slightly gentler pace, but with all the views, hot air ballooning may be the way to go. Here, in Masterton on North Island, the annual Balloon Festival is well on its way. The hot air balloon is the oldest successful passenger-carrying flying machine.
I hope you realise your backside's on TV.
While some have already taken to the sky, others are still cooking breakfast. This trapeze artist must have nerves of steel. Finally, it's time for the night glow, one of the highlights of the event. Every balloon takes part, and to the sound of music, they illuminate the night sky. An equally impressive skyline is Auckland's, just before a thunderstorm. Regularly ranked as one of the top 5 places in the world with the best quality of life, Auckland's mild climate and happy lifestyle makes it the fastest growing city in New Zealand. Auckland is home to many cultures, and it has the largest Polynesian population of any city in the world. Like the rest of New Zealand, Auckland is beautiful, commonly known as the City of Sails. With over 135,000 yachts, it has more per capita than any other city. Hardly a day goes by that doesn't involve some regatta or match race. It's the start of the Women's Match Racing World Championships. Match racing is when 2 teams are paired to race against each other, rather than fleet racing. Probably the most famous match race is the America's Cup, which the Kiwis have won twice already. The race takes place over several days, and although match racing has a complicated set of rules and tactics, sailing on days like these makes it all worthwhile. But it's not only sailing that New Zealand is well known for. There is a thriving wine industry here too. People had been trying to cultivate wine in New Zealand since the mid-1830s. But it wasn't really until the 1970s that winemakers rose to prominence. This is Herzog, a boutique winery in the Marlborough district. It's a small farm and produces a variety of wines, so every bottle is exclusive and sought after. The grapes are harvested early in the morning when the sun isn't too hot. This farm is also organic. No herbicides or pesticides are used, and any pressings are returned back to the vineyard. The owner, Hans Herzog, is very hands-on. Originally from Switzerland, his family have been making wines for almost 400 years. And now, New Zealand is lucky enough to have his craft and experience. Hans chose this spot because of its superior soil quality. Combine this with lots of sunshine and cool nights, and you have the perfect conditions for grapes to ripen in. But wine tasting isn't all you get with a visit to Herzog. You can dine at the award-winning restaurant or the more informal bistro. Either way, you'll always be treated to the finest local produce. Michelin-rated chefs from all across Europe spend their summers whipping up feasts for the guests. The red grape juice is slow fermented for 3 weeks in stainless steel tanks. Once this process is completed, a further fermentation takes place in French oak barrels. This can take up to 30 months, depending on the variety. The winery is fully equipped with the latest high-tech gear. All the bottling, labelling and packaging is done on-site as well. But the best part of being the boss? Sitting back and enjoying the fruits of one's labour. For a truly unspoiled nature experience, head for the western coast of South Island. This is the spot Englishman John Holton now calls home. This secluded area between the Southern Alps and the Tasman Sea is a perfect spot for nature lovers.
The west coast is still very natural and it's still very wild, and it's that attracts myself and tourists to the area.
Take a trip to the beach and visit the local seal colony. Fur seals used to live here in their hundreds of thousands, but once the settlers arrived, they hunted these animals almost to extinction. Many still die every year from being caught in trawling and shark nets. But luckily, they're now under the protection of the Department of Conservation, and the last census estimated their numbers to be around 50,000 and climbing. New Zealand fur seals dive deeper and longer than any other kind of fur seal. Record dives of more than 240 meters have been recorded. They feed mainly at night, when their favorite food, squid, swim to the surface. So during the day, they rest up on rocky shores called haulouts. Directly behind the beach is a stretch of forest which runs up to the Southern Alps. This rainforest forms part of the large Southwest New Zealand World Heritage Site. More than 180 fern species are found here, and some of the trees are almost 800 years old. It is also the only place in the world where you will find the kia, an alpine parrot. John and his colleague, Corrie Connor, regularly bring tours through the forest, so know the area very well. This tree is almost 60 meters high and belongs to a species that was around when dinosaurs still roamed the earth.
And is this a conifer tree, John?
Here we're in the lower Meraki rainforest, and this is a kahikatea tree, and it's famous because it has the most recorded species of any tree in the world perching upon it. The 101 different plants perching in the tree up here. 47 of those are of the higher order of plants, which are vascular plants, and the rest are things like the ferns, the lichens, mosses and liverworts, etc.
But with one tree supporting over 100 species, it seems surprising that it's managed to survive at all.
Most of the trees on them are epiphytes rather than parasites. So in other words, they take either water or chemicals from the tree, but don't actually harm it. And the tree now is old enough. It's between 700 and 900 years old. Nobody's quite sure of the exact age, but it's strong enough to withstand the vines that you see growing up it.
Another event you're likely to take part in is the feeding of the eels. These fish can grow up to 2 meters long and weigh as much as 40 kilograms. Eels are legendary climbers, and young eels, also called elvers, have been known to scale waterfalls of up to 20 meters. Sadly, their habitat is increasingly under threat, so their numbers have been declining.
The males have a life expectancy of about 24 years, and the females, on average, have a life expectancy of 35. But the breeding females, they can be anything up to the age of about 75. And when they spawn, they leave here, and they take quite a long swim. They swim down to the ocean, and then they swim off to Fiji, because they can only spawn where the water is warm. So they've got a swim of about 2,000 miles or 3,000 kilometres. For the most part, man has led to their numbers decreasing rapidly over the last 20 or 30 years. One, by taking away their natural habitat, and that's usually because dams have been put in the rivers. They've also been fished. They're very popular food. One among the Maori, who love to smoke them, and secondly, the Japanese will pay top prices for these creatures. So in fact, by feeding them here, we're actually protecting them, because they know that there's going to be some food at times, so they don't have to go elsewhere. And because they're in around the lodge, they are in fact in a strange way being protected by us. As you can see, they're excellent climbers. They can stay out of water for 3 or 4 minutes without any problem, and do climb all over the place.
But there is so much more exploring to do, and one of the best ways to do this is in a kayak. Experience true wilderness by getting lost in this paradise. Untouched by civilization, it's a haven for an abundant species of plants and birds. With temperate rainforests stretching all the way to snow-capped Alps, this scenery can't be found anywhere else in the world. The Southern Alps stretch for about 550 kilometres, which means they span across almost the entire island. They're also the main reason for the extreme weather differences between the east and west side. The west is cold and wet, while the east has some of the sunniest weather in New Zealand. But most importantly, with peaks as high as 3,000 metres, snowboarders and skiers are drawn to this playground. There are 360 glaciers in the Southern Alps. And one of the most beautiful is Fox Glacier. This river of ice falls 2,600 metres from the base of the Alps to the west coast. Jeremy Haddon is a glacier guide, and when the weather permits, he's up here scrambling over the ice and snow.
Hey guys!
The ice is constantly on the move, shifting and sliding, even forming wave-like tunnels.
Up above us here, we have a really fast-moving piece of ice compared to the piece of ice we're standing on. Up there, moving about 5 metres a day down towards us. We were standing here about 1 metre a day. So somehow this ice has to slow down. So what happens is, as it comes down really fast, hits this flat, slower area and pops up, and we're getting these compression arches formed. What you end up with is these like waves of the beach almost, and it's in these waves, these compression arches, where we're getting the tunnels formed.
Make sure you stay close to your guide though. It's easy to get lost in the labyrinth of tunnels and crevices. While global warming seems to be melting our snowcaps all over the world, here it is having the opposite effect. Glaciers are actually growing in size. It seems fitting that we conclude our journey high up in the Alps with a final glimpse of this magical land. The phenomenal natural wonders of this amazing country enthrall every visitor. Combine this with some heart-stopping action and welcoming locals, and you have the perfect combination for an ultimate journey.